David Plouffe, if you're back there, which I hope you are, come on out. Hi, good to meet you. I'm sorry I've been so busy out here. I haven't had a chance to greet you in the green room. It's really an honor to have you. David Plouffe is a legendary figure in American government and politics, the architect of President Obama's 2 presidential campaigns, an advisor in the White House for much of Obama's presidency, somebody who's still very close to all those people, deeply enmeshed in the Democratic Party. Currently, you must be spending a lot of time on your podcast because it's really good and you're getting a lot of great guests. He has a podcast called Campaign HQ, which I am already addicted to. And if, like me, you're kind of obsessed with this bizarre, complex Democratic primary process, that's what he's focusing on mostly at the moment, and certainly we'll talk about a lot of that today. But he also was a policy executive and consultant or internal advisor at Uber for a while, which must have been interesting in retrospect especially, and also has been working and still works with the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, although I guess you've pulled back a little bit of your time commitment to that. So if we have time, I'd love to talk to you about all that, but we got to start with politics, obviously. You know, looking at the political landscape right now, well, maybe just say, what are you most excited about? What are you most worried about? Big picture.
As it relates to the campaign itself?
Everything, the country.
Well, the country. Well, young people give me excitement. People who are starting businesses, people in high school and college who are organizing and activists for change. You know, I don't think much is going to change in our government. So I talked to many of the CEOs who are thinking about running for president in this last, one may still, but most of them decided not to.
Really?
And it was fascinating to me.
Not Howard Schultz, right?
Well, yeah, I talked to him and
no, but he's not.
He's not running, right?
Not to, right?
But
oh, you mean the one that might?
Yeah. So all folks from business, like, hey, listen, this Congress thing, like, I've got a board. I figure out how to move my board forward. I'll figure it out in Congress. And you know, listen, most of the people in your own party, the most charitable thing you can say is their self-interest they put above the president's, right? And then the other party is sort of sworn to decapitate you. So you know, if we're looking for big, whether it's a long-term deficit deal, comprehensive immigration reform, the things we need to do from a governmental standpoint on climate, they're not impossible. They're going to be really hard. I think if we get into,
regardless of who's elected?
Regardless of who's
regardless
elected.
of whether the Democrats get it?
Yeah, because I think the upper ceiling for a Democrat in the Senate right now is probably 53, 54. So unless you get rid of the filibuster, I think the Senate's going to be pretty close for the next decade. So by definition, things need to be bipartisan, and by definition, things in Washington rarely are these days. So you know so for the foreign policy side of the ledger, the president obviously and their administration has massive control over. And so that will change overnight if we elect a new president. But domestically, it's not all of a sudden like we're going to have a new day in Washington and Congress is going to get along.
But it would be a lot better. If the Democrats won. I mean, I assume you believe that very deeply.
Yeah, so, you know, not quite half the country, maybe 46% of the country feels otherwise, right? So, yeah, but my concern is if Trump gets another 4 years, that's not a doubling of the effect. It's a compounding effect. Okay, we're never going to get back into the Paris climate.
You mean it's exponential?
Yeah, meaning the planet is probably too far gone. I think right now...
Don't laugh, whoever laughed.
No.
It's not funny.
It's not funny. You know, if you think about...
I might have laughed, but it's seriously not funny.
The deficits, which don't get enough attention, are the largest deficits we've had since World War II. We were involved in a global war.
Well, he just spends money.
So it's going to get worse and worse and worse. Doesn't care about it. So that's going to end up saddling us for generations.
Like he was when he went bankrupt.
Right. But the bigger concern for me is the attacks on democratic institutions. He is acting this way and behaving this way, having to face the voters. Okay? When he doesn't have to do that anymore, I think all bets are off. The other thing that concerns me is there is going to be a generation of mostly young white men who thinks this is the way to act and this is the way to get ahead. And I think we're going to be paying that price for decades and decades. So this is not simply like, is it a blue jersey or a red jersey? I do feel more strongly about this. I think this is one of the most important dates in American history, November 3rd, 2020, not just election days. And it's going to be a super close race, and Trump has a very, very good chance to win a re-election.
Has anything he's done stood out as particularly disturbing to you? I mean, for me, it was the pardoning of the three military criminals, pardoning them immediately. That to me was kind of a shocking. I mean, talk about reinforcing bad traits on the part of a lot of Americans. How could you think?
Well, I guess I didn't see I saw coverage. He was tweeting and attacking Lieutenant Colonel Vitamin today.
Just
and so I think. So here's one thing that surprised me. folks forget, when Trump won, one of the reasons he won is there were voters out there who say, he doesn't seem like a reflexive Republican. He actually thinks it's okay to have transgender bathrooms, and he says he wants to tax carried interest, and he actually said he thinks people have health care. You cannot underestimate that. I saw a lot of research heading into the election. Voters in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania said, you know what, I don't think he's just going to throw in with the Republicans in Congress, and he did. That's the big surprise. Because if Trump had taken a different tact, tried to do infrastructure with the Democrats, which they would have done, handle the tax debate differently, healthcare differently. He's already right now, I think, an even money chance to win your election, but I think he'd be greatly advantaged. But listen, at the end of the day, we've never had somebody this focused on their reelection. So I was there. Barack Obama had more than a passing interest in his reelection. So did George Bush, so did Ronald Reagan, so did Bill Clinton. Trump is obsessed with his reelection. That's why he had Powell in the Oval Office yesterday. It's why he harangues all the OPEC countries around gas production. And his campaign is actually incredibly focused right now and spending money. No incumbent president has ever been spending money this early in a campaign. He's spending tens of millions of dollars on Facebook and YouTube primarily in the battleground states, and it's going to give him a big advantage.
Wow. Okay, well, I know that you spent enormous time thinking about the Democratic primary battles. Just give us the sort of state of play in that, in your view, right now.
Well, probably like a lot of you, I don't even know who I'm going to vote for yet. It's very early. So I would say that it is incredibly early. Most of the voters in Iowa, in New Hampshire, and South Carolina, much less the rest of the country, haven't firmly decided who they're going to vote. So there's going to be a lot of fluidity. But there's the great winnowing will be upon us. Some people will drop out between now and Iowa, and others will have to get out, after Iowa and after New Hampshire. So the question for me really is when we come out of South Carolina, which is the gateway to the rest of the country, and South Carolina is an enormously important primary in both Democratic and Republican
More
parties.
important than the other ones coming up?
I think it is, because it's the gateway, it's the last one, and somebody who does really well in South Carolina with the African-American vote almost assuredly just 10 days later will do, or just a few days later will do well in other parts of the country. So who's alive after that, and how many candidates are alive? If Joe Biden's alive after South Carolina, it means he somehow, some way found a way to right the ship, and then he's probably going to be the nominee because he's going to win the African-American vote. If he's not, and if it's just Mayor Pete and Sanders and Warren as the three, that's fascinating because none of them have a strong claim to the African-American vote. If somehow Harris or Booker or Deval Patrick can find their way through, they'll be advantaged. So that's the thing I'd encourage you to understand is it's not linear. And who those semifinalists and finalists are that the candidates themselves have no control over is going to be so important to the ultimate outcome. But I think we're going to get huge turnout. I think that helps some of the non-traditional candidates like a Mayor Pete. But what I'm interested in as a Democrat, as an American, is when things like there's some concern that this primary is getting too heated. This is like the most gentle pillow fight of all time. Like I want these people to knife each other because you're going up against Donald Trump. I want to see who can handle it.
Oh, they should be fighting harder now.
Harder now, with everything they've got, because. And I will tell you, I've led successful campaigns at every level of government here in the U.S. I'm not sure how you run against Trump day to day because of just the way he dominates the oxygen, okay? So you saw Hillary Clinton ran a flawed campaign in many ways, won all three debates by every statistical measure, had a better convention, had a better rollout of running mates. So those are the things she controlled, the big moments. The rest of the campaign, which was most of the rest of the time, Trump dominated, just because she couldn't sort of get a word in edgewise. So I think whoever we nominate is going to have to figure that out, and that's going to be super complex.
Do you think any of the candidates now are showing better instincts about that in particular?
Well, they're not running against Trump. So by the way, Trump, now, I think Trump makes a mistake because he himself is only focused on Twitter, which is where most voters aren't, but it's a great filter. So Trump innately thinks social media first. His campaign is run by digital marketers. So I think there's no Democrat right now. Mayor Pete shows signs of it. Warren shows signs of it. Right. But the example I use is if you're going to go roll out your health care plan, your education plan, most of the Democrats are still thinking, well, what's the policy? That's a good thing. But, who am I going to give the first interview with? Is it the Times or the Post? And, where's my speech going to be? And what's the backdrop? Instead of thinking like, what's my Facebook and Instagram play on this? So that's my concern. That is the way the Trump campaign thinks.
It seems to me that Buttigieg understands that as well as anybody.
It's more native to him,
yeah.
Right? So he's the one I have the most hope, if he were the nominee, would run the most. It really has to be a Facebook and Instagram first campaign.
Right.
That has to be like your North Star, and everything sort of hangs from there. And that sounds to everyone in this room super obvious. But I think in politics, that translation hasn't happened all the way.
Talk about Deval Patrick, because that's an unexpected development and has a lot of provocative things about it. I know you know him very well.
Yeah.
Explain how you reacted.
I wish he had decided to run a long time ago. Yeah, I helped Deval win, election in Massachusetts, first African-American governor of Massachusetts, only second African-American governor in American history to that point. He's a remarkable person, and he's a political talent. He actually has he's got an amazing skill. Some politicians can kind of get a room standing up and applauding. He can quiet a room, make people think and listen. It's just
kind of like Obama, actually.
Yeah, but Obama could also reach the other way, but yeah, less a yeller and screamer. So the problem for Deval is it's just really late. And so as much as there's fluidity, he has to, in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, recruit staff, recruit precinct captains who are your volunteer leaders, build a database of supporters. He's got to raise a ton of money, unlike Bloomberg, who basically can just plant his flag on Super Tuesday and spend $100 million and see what happens. So Deval is disadvantaged. So I think, and I spent some time talking to him about this, I think his personal situation changed. He was able to get in the race. He was concerned about what he was seeing, didn't see anybody who was a political savior. This is going to be a hard race against Trump. So it's just the degree, and here's the thing, even though it's early and there'll be a lot of moving around, I would say here in San Francisco, in New York, in Washington, in Boston, Democratic donors in particular are dissatisfied with the field. But the voters in Iowa and New Hampshire say, I'm pretty satisfied. I got young, I got old, I got left, I got center. Like, I'm okay, I got some choices. So I'm not sure there's the opening for a Bloomberg or a Patrick. They're hearing constantly from people in the Acela corridor and really from LA to San Francisco about this. I think in Iowa it's a different conversation.
Do you believe that, one of the things that seems from my experience and what little I know about this is indispensable for the Democrats to win is black turnout. And is that something you agree, that if that can't be motivated to come at a higher level than Hillary succeeded, it's almost a game over?
You need it all, though.
Yeah.
So there's this very unhealthy debate, largely on Twitter, but not just on Twitter, on cable TV too, with Democrats saying we should be all base or all swing, okay? There's a simple math exercise. You're going to need it all, because here's what Trump's going to do. The one thing I'm certain of, Trump's going to get astronomically high turnout, okay? There's a mythology that says the unregistered voters in America benefit Democrats. Well, they do in California and they do in New York. In Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, and Michigan, there's a lot more people who aren't registered who look like Trump's base than not. He's going to blow out turnout. So the degree of difficulty for a Democrat gets higher. So yes, you've got to maximize African-American turnout and registration, Latino turnout and registration. You're going to have to max out the suburban vote, which has almost become a Democratic base, particularly with women, and young. But let's look at Wisconsin. Hillary lost Wisconsin by 23,000 votes. So she got 29,000 votes just in the city of Milwaukee than Obama. So you could say, man, if we just rectify that, we're fine. Do you want a margin for error of 6,000 votes? Of course not. She got 250,000 less votes than Obama in blue-collar and rural and exurban areas. Same thing in Pennsylvania. She actually got more votes in Philadelphia than Obama did, but in the suburbs outside of it, trailed. Well, particularly, Scranton, where Dunder Mifflin is from The Office, okay? Obama won it by 17 or 18, she won it by 2. Erie County in Pennsylvania, Obama won it by 16, she lost it by 10. Massive swings. And so so we need a Democrat who, okay, let's talk about Wisconsin. You have to get the kid who just moved to Madison from South Dakota to not just register and vote in Wisconsin, but volunteer. You've got to get the young 22-year-old non-college person, African-American in Milwaukee, to register, vote, and get active, and win back to 58-year-old iron worker in Racine who won Obama-Trump. You have to do it all, and if you don't, you're going to lose, and Trump's going to win. So that's what's required here, and particularly when you look at the number of votes Trump's going to get. I mean, the only state last time where I think he got close to getting to his ceiling was Florida, where he got almost 500,000 more votes than Romney did. Everywhere else, we didn't see that effect. And so you're going to see Trump, I think, really turn out. Listen, there's a lot of people out there who aren't currently wearing MAGA hats that will. And he'll get them out and he'll find them. And he's utilizing impeachment. That's what he's doing. So, really, really clever digital advertising to find people who currently aren't registered or might be registered and might vote for him but aren't volunteers and try and find them. So I think impeachment was the right thing to do as a citizen. I think this is far more serious than what Nixon faced and what Clinton faced or even Andrew Johnson. It should be looked at. Politically, I think it's very much an open question ultimately where the benefit's going to lie.
Wow, there's so many things I want to ask you about Silicon Valley and your work in other areas more recently, but I think we should go to the audience and let people in the audience direct how we prioritize from here. There's so many things to ask. Oh, nobody's got a hand up already? Jesus.
People are
Okay,
already tired of
how
the
about right over
election.
there? I would love to ask you about Chan Zuckerberg, I'll tell you that.
name is Long Wen, and my question is, what Democratic candidate do you think appeal most to Republicans? Because I think that's what it takes to beat Trump. Really, somebody that can swing the southern state and that can relate to Republicans, not the other way around.
Right. So not to be impolite, but the math just doesn't suggest that. So the most a Democrat can probably get is 7 or 8% of Republican vote at the max. And by the way, that matters. So you want someone who doesn't get 4, gets 8. But this election will be decided by basically taking full advantage of turnout of younger voters and minority voters. And then there are swing undecided voters, more than people realize. Most of them aren't Republican or Democratic. They are independent voters, decline to state voters, depending on the state. So I would caution you not to look at it as who can get Republican votes. It's who can do 2 things with those voters. There are suburban voters who tend to be college educated, more highly income, a lot of women. Some voted for Trump last time, some didn't, but are feeling good about the economy and are open. And then there are mostly non-college, blue-collar voters who, these famous Obama-Trump voters, people didn't realize they existed, but they do, and they exist in fairly big numbers. So that's who you, now, you'll get some Republicans along the way in that as well. And my answer is, we don't know yet, because this campaign has not really started. It doesn't really get serious till after the holidays. And then, 1, who can deal with the scrutiny? Who can deal with the spotlight? And ultimately, this is about votes. Who can produce vote? Who can actually build the organization and attract the kind of support? So I'm not sure yet. I think the political view right now is a Biden or a Mayor Pete would have better chance at winning kind of the centrist voter, than a Warren or Sanders. I think that probably makes sense. But we'll see at the end of the day. There's no doubt that there are some voters out there who, are conflicted, who say, if I have an alternative I'm comfortable with, I'm going to vote against Trump. And so in that, I think there's a lot of people who believe that Biden probably fills that starring role most easily. Mayor Pete might. But they all have challenges. I mean, Democrats who want to beat Trump, what's pretty clear is we do not have a political athlete of such superiority that this is going to be an easy race. Wow. Okay? We're going to have to grind this out.
You said you thought the impeachment was a good idea, but it doesn't sound like you think there's any chance that anything that emerges from impeachment is really going to change the dynamic.
Not in the election, but I'm sort of tired of us viewing everything through a political position lens. Okay?
Oh, that's refreshing coming from you. Okay.
Well, is impeachment the right thing to do or not? Okay?
Good.
And it's clear to me as an amateur student of history and an American citizen it is. But the politics of it, I think we have no idea. I know that Trump will try and leverage every ounce out of it, okay, on his side. Now, Trump doesn't really have playbooks, but I will guarantee you that he didn't want to enter his re-election year under an impeachment inquiry. So, it does. There are voters out there who they're exhausted. They basically say, I just want someone who's going to settle down, tweet less. I'm tired of hearing about Washington all the time. And so for those voters, the impeachment thing adds to that. This guy's just a lot of drama, right? But his messaging that say this is all, the Democrats have wanted me out since day one. They couldn't beat me in the election. Now they're trying to do it through the ballot box. That's effective with his base. I don't think it's particularly effective with swing voters. Right now, I think that the political challenge around impeachment is not whether the American people think he should be impeached or not. It's whether they think the impeachment inquiry was warranted and fair. And I think the testimony so far has been great, but it's during the day. Okay, so things have changed a lot. And so, back during even Clinton, much less during Nixon, 80, 90% of the American people were getting these really, really powerful moments. People aren't getting it today. And that's a challenge,
because
I think. Just, people are working, they're not watching TV, they're not watching highlight, they may see a clip or whatnot. So the consumption of it, so Vindman today, Sondland later in the week, Fiona Hill, I think if you were to have most Americans who aren't hardcore MAGA watch it, they would be disturbed by it. One of my concerns is I'm not sure that last mile is getting executed.
Interesting. Okay, could we get the house lights up a little bit? Here, and then here, and then here. Thank you.
Mike Ellison. At risk of putting a big target on my back, I want to piggyback off the question there. I'm one of the few Republicans in the room. I'm not a Trump fan, and this is probably an election that in 25 years of voting, I could actually vote for a Democrat. But my concern is, and this is what I'd like you to opine on, as a Republican, I see a vicious lurch to the left of the Democratic Party. So if you put a Democratic president, even a moderate one, in office, it's the infrastructure that's going to follow him that concerns me. And I just kind of wonder what you think of that.
Right.
Great
Well,
question.
there's no doubt. I mean, one of my concerns as an American citizen is the left and right of both of our two political parties are getting more and more extreme. And I think that's only going to intensify. You know, you've got, you know, right now, I mean, this is, by the way, some of you may agree with this, but so I'm just reporting the news, but, you know, under 30, you know, most people who identify as Democrats would prefer this to be a socialist rather than capitalist country, right? Now, hearing, you know, when
Under
you
30, yeah.
yeah, when you understand their life, you can understand why some of them come to that conclusion. They're somewhat hopeless about their prospects. But I think that I would focus on this. If a Democrat's elected president, well, my guess is they will execute foreign policy. You may not agree with it all, but in a saner way, in a more methodical way, where we embrace more of our alliances and allies and less, you know, the autocrats. You know, they will have very little ability to execute on their legislative agenda. So for some of us, that may make us sad. For you, you may think that's a good thing, right? So, you know, you're not going to get Medicare for all done in all likelihood. So you'll probably figure out with the existing healthcare system, where could we make some changes? Maybe there's a hope for immigration reform finally, where we deal with both the border. And one of my concerns is there's a lot of Democrats right now who don't think there is such a thing as a border. President Obama spoke about this just a couple days ago. Of course there is. You're going to have to pair that with smart policies to allow legalization of the 11 million people here. You know, they're going to have to deal with a deficit. And, you know, historically, it is Democrats who've inherited, Democratic presidents have inherited massive deficits from Republicans, counter to type, and have done the tough political things. Both Obama and Clinton paid huge prices for doing tough things on the deficit. So my guess is I would optimize if I were someone like you on just normalcy. Okay? Washington's going to be fairly broken still. It's going to be very divided. So we're not going to be able to, through legislative means anyway. The only place where you could have somebody really take the wheel and go hard left or hard right is foreign policy. And I think all the Democrats are in a zone of reasonableness to that approach. So that, and I do think that, so the question is, there are Republicans out there. My sense is Republicans who are truly available to the Democratic nominee have a lot in common with some of the independent voters who might share the same kind of values. So let me give you some, Obama, when we won the landslide in 2008, we beat McCain by 7 points. You know, we won Indiana, so Obama got 11% of the Republican vote in Indiana. That was our high water mark. And my guess is the high water mark these days in a battleground state for Democrats more like 6 to 8. Just as Trump's going to try and get some Democrats. So in a close election, it all matters. But if I were you, I'd watch this. The character of these people matters a great deal to me. Like, one thing that frustrates me, and this, you know, I ran presidential campaigns, okay? So you think I'm the first person to say, let's optimize for who would be the best candidate. I want to focus on who would be a good president, okay? Who will be in that situation room? Who will be in the residence at night with a world leader at 2 o'clock having to make a life or death decision? Because in the White House, your campaign agenda, all your policies, that is a little part of every day because the world intrudes. And you want somebody who then builds a team that's calm, collected, intellectually curious, and may not ultimately make a decision you agree with, but you respect the process they went through. The truth is, my view is we've gotten damn lucky so far with Trump. Because if there's another 4 years, there will be the moment where the way he approaches these things, the self-interest, the lack of intellectual curiosity, the bad decision-making, the bad process, will really bite us in the rear end. So if nothing else, like, I could get excited about that, okay? Just someone's like going to sit in that situation room with the military leaders and civilian leaders around the table and run good process and make good decisions.
House lights, we do need, we'll leave them up. Over here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Beth Bannerman. I work for a biotech outside of San Francisco. David, I'm a big fan. Thanks for all your work. Listen to you on the podcast and Pod Save America as well. So the question is, this feels to me as if it's a train on a track. We know where the train is going. So if we know that the Trump campaign is using digital marketing and advertising, why aren't we? So, or they don't have unique, special, magical tools. We have the same tools they do. Why are we not executing? We also know what the narrative is and how the narrative backfired in the election. So why are we not developing a counter narrative that has two tiers, one for the intellectual and the elite, the thinkers, the people who want a balanced leader in the cockpit, and the other who just want a bumper sticker and they want to feel safe and less scared? Why are we just not breaking it down into a simple approach like any other kind of game or battle where we have an opponent, we're going to go after them with a strategy against what their narrative is trying to put forward. For example, finally, he is essentially a reality TV star. How do we just remove his ratings?
Yeah. Well, I'd say one important point here, and I agree with, is 95% of how the race is going to be run in those questions will be decided by the Democratic nominee in their campaign. Okay? So this is why incumbents tend to win. Trump's got a massive advantage right now because he's focused on general election voters, building his organization, and not just online. They're doing online organizing. Already they're doing a better job offline organizing they did in 2016 when they won, because they've got time. So what my focus has been lately, along with some others, is to get some outside groups. I'm affiliated with a group now called Acronym. There's others, to be spending mostly digitally in these battleground states to reach voters on issues like the economy, healthcare, women's healthcare issues, character issues, to find out who's movable, why, who's not, and why, so that A, we're preventing Trump from raising his ceiling, because this race largely comes down to that. So Trump's going to drive up his registration and turnout, but he probably can't get to 50% of the vote in most states that he needs to. So he's going to try and drive a lot of vote to third party. So a Republican might say, hey, I'm not doing Trump again, but I can't do the Democrats, but I'm going to vote, so I'm going to vote third party. That killed Clinton in 2016. And so a lot of work has to be done, but that is really just triage work till we have a nominee. So the scale of difficulty for a nominee, they're going to come out of this primary broke, tired, a splintered party, and having run a completely different race to liberal, totally tuned-in voters and have to switch on a dime. And Trump's going to be waiting there, okay, shooting from above, as every incumbent did. I mean, think what we did to Romney. Think what Clinton did to Dole. Think what Reagan did to Mondale. Think what Bush did to Kerry. Okay, we won the race before it started. So Trump's going to try and do that. And so I agree with you. So groups on the outside need to do all they can. And listen, the work I'm involved on now, we've learned a lot about how to move his economic approval rating down a little bit, how to really move him with healthcare. So that is all gifts we can hand to our eventual nominee. But that fight is basically a 5-month fight. That's what it is. Now, would I like to go into re-election with Trump's number in hands? Of course not. Okay? He's very weak and he's very vulnerable. But the advantage of incumbency, his ability to, I think, register a lot of new voters and turn them out, and he is a brilliant marketer. So it's not just how he uses social media to lift himself up. The way he defines Democrats is super effective. Listen, I've seen research recently with swing voters in battleground states like, hey, if a Democrat wins, I can't eat a hamburger or steak anymore. I can't fly on a plane. Okay? You laugh. You laugh. Okay? And it's very smart. So, so I agree there's a lot we can do. And so those of us who have some ability to do some good work between now and June need to do it. But this largely falls on them, okay? I don't know who them is, but I hope it's somebody who's tough and savvy enough. I do think, listen, I'm still privy to political research with voters, and this ratings thing is important. There is a growing number of people out there who are sort of just tired of the act, okay? They're tired of the act. And so impeachment, even though they might not sure, should he be impeached, should he not, they're like, it's another thing that's not about me, it's about him, okay? So I think we need to find a way to leverage that. I mean, it may be that ends up being a really important message in the last 5 months from our nominee is simply, you know what, it's less about like, I'm gonna completely change things. It's just, I'm gonna like settle things down a little bit. I think there's a lot of people out there, and not just centrists, even a lot of Democrats, like I think that's the thing a lot of people yearn for. And so it'll be interesting to see if we can land that plane.
Well, unfortunately, we have to wrap. But I don't know if you have any time to hang out for another 15 or 20 minutes. So many people would love to ask you questions.
Sure.
Not obligation, but
Sure.
wonderful to have you.